This is Autism Points of View by Autism Speaks. I'm Felipe Maya. In this episode, we'll talk about our understanding of nonverbal people with autism. Through research, we know that about 30% of people with autism are nonverbal, but the term nonverbal can mean something different for each person. Professor Connie Cassery of the UCLA Center for Autism Research and Treatment.
Well, I think that is one of the things that we've learned over the past decade or so, is that individuals really aren't nonverbal, that there are very, very few individuals who can make absolutely no sounds or have no communicative intent. So there's a range of ways that people communicate, sometimes with actually long scripts that they've learned from TV or from other situations. Most individuals can say some words, but they will also communicate in other ways through gesture use and so on. And so it's probably not the case that most people who are minimally verbal even can't say any words at all.
Some people on the autism spectrum who communicate using only scripts or gestures still may have trouble finding a way to express complex ideas. But some do find a way.
All right, Paul, let me just get my questions out.
Okay, you've already answered the question.
It's not okay.
Everything is okay. Paul, where are we? New York City, in Christy's office.
And thank you for coming to New York City. I really appreciate it. So I'll just start and ask the first question. So tell me your name and a little more about you.
My name is Paul Kotler, and I go to Widener University. I am majoring in psychology.
As a child, Paul Kotler was nonverbal, and some medical professionals even told his mom he was intellectually disabled. Then he began typing at 14 years old. His first words to his mom were, "I love you," and "trust me."
Yes, sometimes people speak to me like I'm a child. Most non-speaking autistics are mislabeled as cognitively impaired and referred to as low functioning. Low functioning is a common fallacy. It makes people reduced to failures. It allows people to assess and really dismiss people without any true understanding, including the insights the person has and the obstacles that prevent the person from being able to participate.
Christy Patton Koenig, Chair and Associate Professor in the Department of Occupational Therapy at NYU Steinhardt.
I think as educators and as professionals, when we hear the term nonverbal, we assume a profile. And I think what I've learned talking to a lot of individuals that have found a way to communicate that are non-speaking and now, for example, type independently, many of my assumptions were wrong. And if I could go back, and say, I'm sorry, I get it now, I would do that, but as I grow as a professional and in my research and in my career, that I think to me is a fundamental do no harm proposition. If I am talking to you as if you can understand as a medical professional or as a healthcare professional, even if you're not responding, versus I'm talking about you in front of you, which we do all the time, right? Which one should I choose? And I think that choice can be very powerful for that individual, that whether or not you feel that they're getting it.
Treat nonverbal people as totally intact in every way. Show patience and understanding without patronizing. Talk to us like peers. Everyone deserves dignity. No matter what a person acts like outside, they may just be unable to share their inner thoughts with you. I'm a living example. The behaviors I demonstrate outwardly have nothing to do with my intellect. In reality, there are full, complex people trapped within until they find a way to communicate.
Professor Koenig has worked with Paul for years. I could tell he was excited to see her again. Every so often during our interview, he would smile and say her first name, Christy.
It's Christy. It's a chicken.
So tell me a little bit about Paul.
Oh, Paul. Paul I met when he was 14, and I think that's right when he started typing independently. So he's someone that I met that really, when I met him, he was communicating, and he was communicating a lot.
I have apraxia. It is slow getting each correct sound very clear, because my mouth muscles can't move fluently. I cannot naturally always get the right vocabulary when I talk. Typing allows me to always say exactly the same thing I'm thinking. Being autistic makes connecting with others more challenging, because I can't very naturally have a very normal conversation.
When I met Paul, he didn't shake my hand or wave at me. He just walked right past me to look out the window at the busy NYC street. He really loves being in the city because of the sensory input he gets from the traffic and the crowded sidewalks.
It seems like Greenwich Village, in New York City, would be an overwhelming sensory experience, but lands me in a sensory calm place. So much traffic and many vehicles to look at. Cabs sound different than trucks. Sometimes I can even hear a bike coming. Lots of mechanical noises to keep me focused. I don't care about the crowds because of it. I can find that I get lost in the crowd, and no one notices that I move differently, or act differently, because there are so many around.
I remember going, and one day we got out a big piece of paper. I'm like, what do you want in your life? Like, he can clearly communicate, non-speaking, types to communicate. And we just started mapping out what he wanted and what strengths he had in order to get there. And, I think for so many young adults, adolescents, young adults, and adults that are autistic, the way the system is designed, and I'm going to say special education and therapy, the related services, the way the system is designed is to work on your remediated weaknesses, right? And no one builds their lives on remediated weaknesses. You don't, I don't, we don't build our lives on our remediated weaknesses. Yet systems are set up to really just focus on that and that alone. And not that weaknesses and challenges shouldn't be addressed. They absolutely should. But there's got to be a parallel process, deeply integrated, I would say, deeply embedded, about those strengths and abilities and talents, because I think it's a crime if someone gets to the age of 21 and they have no idea what they're good at.
For me, shifting an emphasis to strengths saved me in better accepting myself. It was very powerful and motivating, having confidence I could accomplish meaningful, heartfelt goals, and I could get support, instead of focusing on my deficiencies.
So I think this term, this kind of coined term, optimal outcome, referred to individuals that really didn't look like they had autism. So an optimal outcome was an individual with IQ in the typical range, going to a regular school, acting like every other child in a classroom, and not really showing any of the symptoms of autism. And of course, that happens. That certainly happens that our kids fit in and can do well in a general education program. Optimal outcome, however, is broader than that. So I think optimal outcome really has to do with where you start. Our interventions need to be so much more personalized and diversified.
There's a popular saying in the autism community by Autism Speaks board member and Adelphi University professor Stephen Shore. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, meaning no two people on the autism spectrum are the same. Each has a unique combination of strengths and challenges.
Learning to type has allowed me to communicate, share ideas, go to college, and teach people about autism. Before I developed my typing skills, I could listen, but not express myself, in a complex way. That is why even though typing is exhausting and makes me anxious, I do not take it for granted. Without writing, my life wouldn't be as exciting and would be much more limited. Writing is a powerful tool for anyone who wants to express themselves.
Paul is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. He works hard on his challenges every single day, and he has this invaluable insight into the world around us that needs to be heard.
Overall, I want people to know that I am a normal guy who just happens to communicate differently than the vast majority of people. A guy who has different ways of dealing with the great amount of sensory input that is found naturally in the environment. And a guy who has lots to say if people take the time to listen.
All the answers you've heard from Paul so far were typed ahead of our interview. Paul types one letter at a time, so it takes him a little while to compose a full answer. But I was able to ask him some follow-up questions in person, then wait for him to type his replies.
It's a chicken, chicken, that S-L, chicken, that S-L, chicken, that
Hey, Paul, take a breath. Take a breath. Go ahead.
me,
Grab it. What's next? Keep going. Keep going.
The final question I asked him was, what advice do you have for parents of nonverbal or non-speaking children with autism?
Know that your children hear you. Treat them as you would your other children. Talk about everything, and know that even though they may not appear to understand, they do.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Autism Points of View. We'll have a new episode every 2 weeks, so make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you would like us to cover, we want to hear from you. Email connectwithus@autismspeaks.org and put podcast in the subject line. This episode was produced by me, Felipe Maya, and edited by Dax Schaefer. For bonus content and resources related to this episode, visit autismspeaks.org/podcast.
Hey. Paul, you can't ransack the office and have a seat. Come on.